Has there been a timeline shift?
We have shifted into a more positive timeline.
We just recently jumped a massive timeline.
This past weekend, we shifted timeline.
Are we in the good timeline now? People are saying it, but is it real? Well, we're going to investigate today on Scroll Deep, the show that keeps up with internet nonsense, so you don't have to. Brought to you by Nando's Summer Menu. So the internet is saying there's been a timeline shift.
So did you experience this timeline jump that we had this weekend?
I'm still integrating into it. My body is buzzing right now.
Basically, it's a fun way of saying that things seem to be looking up. Things are looking good. Because the internet can only process things as trends. We can't just be like, it's nice today. We're like, it's giving timeline shift of the positive vibe. The aura of the weather is trending upwards from yesterday when it was cloudy. It was giving cloudy era yesterday. And now it's sunny vibes. That's my impression of Gen Z weatherman, which I will be premiering at the open mic down the road to a hail of booze. Basically, it's saying, we were part of one timeline. Everyone thinks in terms of multiverses these days. It's one of the many crimes of the MCU. We were part of one timeline, a bad timeline where pandemics happen and Trump is president and everything sucks. But now apparently we've shifted to a slightly more optimistic path. But is there any truth to this? Is it just cope? Well, people have been talking about a timeline shift for a while now, ever since 2022. And I think part of that is people just desperately wanting to have some sense of optimism, some sense of things getting a little bit better. But I will say for some people, especially on TikTok, there are some people who talk about the timeline shift, not in metaphorical terms. It is a spiritual thing for them.
Yesterday, I just was so tired, dude. I felt like I was literally walking through sludge. But then I'm thinking dude, isn't it because we just fucking went through a portal?
A couple of signs and symptoms to show that you have shifted timelines. First of all, number one is you just know. You know in your heart that you have jumped timelines.
It's something you just feel. It's like the movie Tenet. You just go, I feel like there's been a, what was that thing I kept doing last episode that you guys hated? Where I was like, You're just walking along the street one day and you're like, I think there's been a vibe shift. I can't tell you how much they hate that. I'm sure you love it. They hate it.
Cut it all out so they haven't seen it.
Oh, there we go. It was cut out of the last episode. That's how much they hate it. But for context, we cut about 3 to 4 hours out of every episode, and most of last week I just kept going, But these people who very much believe in a timeline shift, they sort of associate it with the Mandela effect. That thing where you go, what? I thought Nelson Mandela died in the 80s, but actually he died later. Look, I am such a Mandela effect hater. I cannot buy into it even slightly. Richard Simmons, who is a celebrity, he died last week, and that set off a load of Mandela effect people who were like, what? I thought he died last year.
You're not going crazy. Richard Simmons has died 3 times.
Where Richard Simmons passed away a decade ago?
Dr. Ruth and Richard Simmons just died this weekend. I knew something was up.
And it's okay, you were wrong about that then. You probably thought he already died because he lived a very private life where he wasn't famous anymore. I just think there's so many more interesting and weird things you could believe. Look up the Gateway process. The CIA decided to investigate if God was real and basically concluded yes. And you can just read that in an official CIA report. It's nuts. That's so much more interesting than being wait, I thought Cleveland from Family Guy was slightly taller than that. That's not fun. Anyway, these people who love it, it's really funny actually if you watch these videos. I don't mean to be too much of a hater because I guess they're not hurting anyone, but you get these videos where they're like, a cosmic shift has entered our timeline. And Richard Simmons dying is the key. And it's do you think that's really what the angels or whatever are preoccupying themselves with? The mighty aliens that control our reality are once we hit them with Richard Simmons dying, that's when things will unravel. Because actually, when you think about it, the meaning of life is, oh look, we've got a mystery delivery from our friends at Nando's. Yes, it's time for the Nando's Mystery Bag, where every week we check out what's in the bag. What will it be? My goodness, it's a spicy rice bowl. Mamma mia, that's a spicy rice bowl. Obviously, if you got this in Nando's, it would come in a bowl, but this has been delivered, so it's in a rectangle. Spicy rice rectangle. What else is in the bag? It's one of those Mary Poppins bags. Oh, it's a small crab puppet. What do you think of the spicy rice bowl, Mr. Krabs is a copyrighted character. I have to come up with a more creative name. What do you think of it, Mrs. Krabs? No, what do you think of it, Krabs McGinty? Oh, to be sure. It's nice to finally have a small animal mascot for the show, something we've never had previously. Thanks so much to Nando's and their summer menu, all the best food to get your claws into, and the Nando's Mystery Bag will be back next week with even more surprise and wonder. But it does feel, based on current events, that maybe we are in a better timeline now. I mean, only a month ago, we had a 1,000-year-old Joe Biden struggling to debate Donald Trump, and many of us wondered how we ended up in this bizarre and depressing version of reality, but now there's been a shift. So let's break down the things that have shifted. Not everything is about politics, and certainly not everything is about US politics, but Kamala Harris entering the race, there's been a noticeable vibe shift. First of all, there was this wave of almost hysterical hype from Democrats and really anyone on the left. I mean, anyone who doesn't like Donald Trump, the second she entered the race. Because, Donald Trump is an incredibly unpopular and bizarre figure. People talk about him as if he's this crazy boogeyman. He's really unpopular and spends hours talking about Hannibal Lecter. He has this weird new thing where he keeps doing rallies where he talks at length about Hannibal Lecter, the guy from Silence of the Lambs, and he talks about him like he's a real guy.
Silence of the Lambs, the late great Hannibal Lecter. He's a wonderful man.
And no one can figure out why. And the one theory is that Donald Trump is obviously against asylum seekers, and Hannibal Lecter was kept in an asylum. And the theory is that Donald Trump thinks that asylum seekers are like people from Arkham Asylum. It's the only reason anyone can come up with about why he keeps on about Hannibal Lecter. It's bizarre. But the second he dropped out, everyone became that Mr. Krabs meme where they were like, wait a minute, I hate Donald Trump. And now Kamala is surging in the polls, and her team has really led into it. And you've got to give her credit for the hype as well. She's come up with this line of attack, which is so clever, where they're just calling Trump supporters weird. And it is working to such a comical degree. It actually comes from Kamala because someone said to her like a year ago, if you were in that famous Hillary-Trump debate where Trump kept like walking up behind her and like sniffing her hair and being weird, what would you have done? And Kamala basically said, I would have just turned around and said, why are you being so weird? But the Democrats have now adopted this as their new attack line, and it is working so well because these people online are so incredibly weird. And when you say to them, you're being weird, their only response is to be more weird. They're like, you think I'm weird? Look at this cartoon I drew of a trans person. And it's like, dude, that's very weird. That's not a good response. And aside from sort of changing the fortunes of the Democratic Party, I think that also maybe I'm overstating this, heralds a little bit an ending or at least a cooling of the sort of never-ending culture war we've been in since 2016. All the insane kind of, Rishi failing, all the Trump people being weird. I think everyone is just very exhausted of being mad online. I think we finally reached a bit of an end of that. It's not like all the problems are solved, but I think the level of like insane hysteria, like people just haven't got the fuel to keep up with it anymore, which would certainly be a vibe shift. Perhaps even a timeline shift. Obviously over here in Britain, in bloody Britain, innit? First of all, we finally banned chimney sweeping, which I think is huge, because those kids were getting so sooty, and I think it was wrong. We've also, for the first time this year, We've been sending people to dental school. We're going to open our first dentist by 2050. It's going to be massive. I dream of a future where kids are mostly unsooty and have almost half of their adult teeth. And I think that is a Britain we can believe in. But over here in Britain, we've got this Labour government. We've ended 14 years of misery under the Tories. Keir Starmer, not an overly inspiring political figure, but someone that people have been getting absolutely hyped about because it's something at least vaguely positive that isn't insanely depressing. Plus, when it comes to vibe shift, you've also got to think on a simpler level. It is summer. There's so many memes that are like, I was having a bad day. I didn't realize I just needed to go outside and look at the sun for 3 minutes. Like, when it's summer, you do just feel better. There's been a bit of a, I guess, season shift because we were going hardcore winter mode. Then we were spring-pilled, but now it's all about summer vibes. It's Brat summer, baby. Embrace it. And it's not just any summer. It's a summer where we had the Euros, we had the Olympics, the world's best background noise. It is so fun to watch the Olympics and get so invested in some sport you didn't know existed 5 minutes ago. So is it that a giant universal timeline has shifted, or is it just August and we're all enjoying the springboarding? But let's be real for a second. Let's just be depressing for a second. Not everything is great. The timeline may have shifted for some, but for other people, we're still in the bad timeline. We've still got war in Ukraine. Every day we hear about a new atrocity in Gaza. I mean, there's plenty of suffering around the world and plenty of suffering that has been continually happening. So yes, there's been a shift for some people, but ultimately we're still in a relatively bad timeline, also known as being alive. But what do you think? Were you going about your day when suddenly, you felt a timeline shift? Do you think we are on the path to a brighter future? I think most of us kind of have a mindset of like, surely it couldn't get any worse. What could possibly go wrong? It certainly seems a bit better than it was, at least in the pandemic days. And if we do have a timeline shift, do you think it will last? Or do you think maybe finally we'll get the nukes flying? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And while you're here, seeing as you made it to the end, it's time for the secret question for all the cool kids who make it this far into the show. And everyone enjoys the numbers section, but I think it's time to launch the emoji section of the show. I want you to post your favorite extremely obscure emoji. Is it the... Let's have a look at these. Is it the tap pouring water with a line through it? Is it the word up with an exclamation mark? Or the golden hook? Which will be your favorite obscure emoji? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you made it this far, of course, remember to follow Scroll Deep and give the video a like, because this is your #1 source for all the latest nonsense happening online. Listen, life is very busy. You haven't got time to keep up with this. Who are we kidding? Yes, you do. You don't do anything. But it's still more convenient than you watching 100 videos. I'll watch them for you and give them to you here in a delicious package, and you're welcome. I'm Benedict Townsend, this is Scroll Deep. Thank you so much to Nando's and their new summer menu for sponsoring this episode. Until next time, bye.